Good evening and welcome to Dead Sleep True Crime for Bedtime. I'm Nancy Miller, the creator of this podcast, and what you are about to hear is a short teaser for the latest bonus episode. As you may or may not know, Dead Sleep is 100% ad-free and listener-supported. That means it really does rely on you, the listener, to succeed. If you would like to ensure the success of this podcast and enjoy a subscriber-only bonus episode each month, please feel free to subscribe via Spotify, Patreon, and Apple Podcasts. Just a few dollars a month really does make a difference in covering the essential production costs in making this podcast. Thank you for supporting my work, and I hope my work supports you. You can enjoy a free month on Apple Podcasts and a free 7-day trial on Patreon. Thank you. And now, on to the teaser of the latest bonus episode. June 14th, 1981. Oh, it was a beautiful day. One of the most beautiful, most memorable, most important days of young Melinda's life. Her wedding day. The bride wore white, of course. Her dress was a 1980s era confection. Big puffy sleeves, a sweetheart neckline, plenty of lace and ruffles. She wore her long copper red hair down and feathered. A crown-like white veil perched on top. And while she looked like a princess, Melinda understood marriage was not some fairy tale. This was a lifelong commitment. That she, 18-year-old Melinda, would take this man, 18-year-old Clarence, as her husband. For better and for worse, for richer and for poorer, in sickness and in health. Until death do they part. But there were things not in those wedding vows that Melinda wasn't quite prepared for. Nobody could be. As Melinda smiled into the face of her handsome husband, his dark hair, rugged good looks, and piercing blue eyes, gazing back at her lovingly, Melinda had no idea. There would come a time when Melinda would have to do more than prove her love to her own husband. She would have to prove his innocence to the entire world. Many years from now, when the honeymoon is long over, Clarence will be accused of an unthinkable, horrific crime. The murder of Melinda's own mother, Judy Johnson. The wedding vows she would utter that day. Love, honor, cherish. They wouldn't be enough. She will have to sacrifice, risking it all, including her own life, the life of her husband, even her own children, so she can get to the truth. Who was really behind her mother's death? And how would she bring this twisted killer to justice? A murder mystery she would be forced to solve alone, abandoned by her family, dismissed by detectives, Melinda would discover she only had one place to turn to crack this case: her television, and a certain true crime procedural series, Forensic Files. It's Nancy here, and for our final installment of Forensic Files February, I chose an episode that is one of my favorites: the saga of a woman who has to prove her husband's innocence and catch her mother's killer using the techniques she gleans from Forensic Files reruns. And here we were, just falling asleep to it. Thank you so much for supporting the show, and thank you so much for joining me in this Forensic Files flashback. And I love this episode because it reveals what's possible with a bit of forensic knowledge and a lot of determination, where all that true crime consumption is actually put to good use. Now, the original episode is available for free on YouTube. It's a Forensic Files episode from Season 12 titled All But Certain. But as you know by now, this is my dead sleep version of events that I've transformed for appropriate nighttime listening. That means no gory details, especially no graphic details of violence against women or children. So if you'd like to know the full scope of this case, I encourage you to watch the original Forensic Files, which I'll again link to in the show notes, along with a handful of other sources I relied on to make this episode. So with that, let's settle in for the night. As we fast forward from that blissful day of Melinda's wedding in June of 1981, and travel ahead in time 17 years, all the way forward to another summer night in June of 1998, where Melinda, now in her mid-30s, sat at her kitchen table waiting for Clarence to come home that Saturday night. Much would be made of these hours, a time that would later be known by everyone as the before. But at that moment, it was just another Saturday night. An ordinary night in an ordinary marriage, an ordinary home, in an ordinary life. Melinda wasn't necessarily angry while she waited for Clarence. You don't stay married to someone for this long and get mad about such things, like staying out late, drinking at a bar. At a certain point, anyone who wants a marriage to last knows that the way you show your love is less exuberance, more tolerance. Besides, it was Saturday night, the beginning of summer, one of the hottest nights of the year. Who could blame a hard-working man for wanting a little time out of the house? Especially on that sweltering summer June night in this part of Northeast Ohio, where the best way to stay cool in this heat was head down to a local bar and sip an ice-cold beer, maybe 2. Possibly 3. Who knew? Maybe Melinda would have joined him. She was in her 30s, but she still liked to have fun, still looked like she was 18, with a baby face and big blue eyes, her red hair now a platinum blonde, styled with long ringlet curls. Her complexion as peachy as the state of Georgia, where Melinda was born. But that night, Melinda had stayed home, nursing one of her 2 sons who was sick that night, Their boys were 12 and 14, too old for a babysitter, but too young to be home on their own on a Saturday night. Eventually, Clarence came home, Melinda went to bed, and everything seemed fine. But she would later remember how she slept so fitfully. She couldn't help but feel like something was wrong. But she had no inkling as to what it was, and no concept of how wrong, how bad life could be. That would all change the next morning, Sunday, sometime after 8 a.m., as the Elkins family roused awake. Melinda headed to the kitchen to begin breakfast. From somewhere in the house, one of their boys shouted that he saw something. Clarence also heard a ruckus of some kind in the driveway, and he walked outside to investigate. Melinda, clutching a hot mug of coffee, glanced out a window overlooking the front yard. Their house faced the road, but along the sides and the back of their home, their property was surrounded by dense woods. And Melinda noticed, out of the corner of her eye, the green leaves on the trees, they began to tremble, as if there were an earthquake, or the first rumble of a terrible storm. And that's when she saw the men. So many men. An army emerging from the woods, then dozens more rushing up the driveway. The ones in the driveway wore all black, covered head to toe in tactical gear. A SWAT team who swiftly surrounded her husband like frenzied wasps, coming at him from all sides, jabbing at him until he surrendered, swallowed up by the swarm. It happened in seconds, but these kinds of moments, the ones that shatter our everyday reality, these shocking events can create an altered state, one that makes everything feel like it's happening in slow motion. It's as if our brains have to slow it all down just to keep up. With her husband being dragged away by this SWAT team, Melinda rushed to the door to find out what was going on. And as she went to her door, she was met by the local sheriff. She demanded to know what was happening. But as this sheriff stood in her doorway, he made it pretty clear he'd be the one asking the questions. The first question was the most important. What is your mother's name? Melinda answered, Judy Johnson. Melinda now begged to know if her mother was all right. And the sheriff, realizing she didn't know anything about what had happened in the wee hours of that morning, he had a look on his face that Melinda knew right away. It was bad. She couldn't conceive of just how bad. The sheriff informed her that her mother was dead, murdered, in her own home. The cause of death, a vicious and violent attack. An altercation that resulted in her mother suffering from a series of fatal stab wounds and other terrible injuries. After that, there were rapid-fire questions about last night, specifically where her husband Clarence was. Did she happen to know his whereabouts? And she said he was home But the authorities, they begged to differ. They knew for a fact Clarence Elkins was an hour away at his mother-in-law's house, following through on a murder he'd been thinking about for a long time. Melinda said that was not possible. What kind of evidence did they have? And they informed Melinda they had a key witness, an eyewitness, someone who was very close to Judy Johnson, someone who was there that night and saw everything. Judy's 6-year-old granddaughter, Melinda's young niece, Brooke. Brooke had spent the night at Grandma's house, and Brooke was asleep in bed when she awoke to the sound of yelling in the living room. Then she ran out and saw the man who was attacking, killing her grandmother. And Brooke said, the man, it was her Uncle Clarence. Melinda didn't have time to take in all the details, not yet. Her young sons had just watched their father get arrested, and Melinda didn't know how to feel. It was like experiencing an earthquake, then getting hit by a tsunami. One catastrophic event that triggers another catastrophic event. Though for Melinda, these catastrophes were happening at the same place, at the same time, in her life. And while she figured out what was next for her husband, she had to make sense of the first tragedy. Judith Johnson was gone at the age of just 57. For Melinda, it was doubly devastating. A daughter who lost her mother, not once, but twice. Melinda couldn't remember her first mother. Melinda only knew what she was told, that she was born in McKaysville, Georgia, located right along the border of Tennessee. Back in 1963, when she was born, McKaysville was likely a charming town. But for those who visited from far away, hopeful young couples with financial means, there was only one destination: a special clinic where there were newborn babies available to desperate couples who wanted one for the right price. For years, a disgraced doctor illegally sold an estimated 200 babies to wealthy couples like Melinda's parents, who paid the doctor a sizable sum of $1,000, quite a bit of money back in 1963, to take a baby home. The couples were told these babies were given up voluntarily by young, unwed mothers, and this illegal adoption scheme was kept a secret until the truth came out, when it was discovered that some of the biological mothers hadn't given up their babies voluntarily. In some cases, these women, many unwed, young, vulnerable, they were told their babies had died, never knowing, in truth, their infant was actually sold to a couple, many from Akron, Ohio, where Melinda's parents were from. An illegal whisper network, a word-of-mouth recommendation, one desperate couple to the next. And so it continued for years. Judy told Melinda she was adopted when she was 7 years old. But it seems publicly she preferred people to think that Melinda was her biological daughter. This included Judy tweaking her own appearance, including dyeing her hair red, so that she and Melinda would look more alike. But more recently, in 1997, Melinda and her mother, Judy, appeared on the Maury Povich Show, where they shared this sordid adoption scandal on a very popular talk show broadcast in front of millions of people. The goal was to share their story and maybe have some impact. At that time in the late 1990s, it would have been a challenge to track down these birth mothers. When Melinda tried, she discovered the birth certificates and adoption records, such as they were intentionally vague. The entire process secret, opaque. But this experience, going public as a baby from that clinic, it had brought Melinda and her mother Judy closer than ever. And now her mother's shocking death was all the more tragic. And Melinda immediately wondered if it was also connected. After this adoption episode aired, the audience response was potent. There were people who were angry and heaped a lot of judgment on Judy. And Melinda remembered how a few angry viewers had somehow tracked down Judy, harassing her with furious phone calls. How could she have done such a thing? Buying a baby, tearing a child away from its mother. It hadn't been that long since that episode had aired, and they'd still received those phone calls. Melinda wondered if maybe someone who'd seen them on TV was so enraged by this whole illegal adoption scandal, they took it to a deadly next step. More than just phone calls. They tracked her mother down and killed her. But if she was right, and it was some crazy person who had seen her mother on television, it wasn't Clarence's fault. If it was anyone's fault, it was Melinda's. And a crime that took place 35 years ago, the day she was born. Was this far-fetched? Of course. But it was no less far-fetched than believing that Clarence, her husband, was the killer. What's more, as the details emerged about what happened, she was horrified. It was beyond explanation. The whole thing was so surreal. A Bermuda Triangle of loss. First she'd think of her mom, then her husband, then her niece, then back to her mother, then back to her husband, and then her niece. She tried to get the police to understand just how big this illegal adoption scandal was. And with this theory came a chilling revelation. Melinda told the police if anything she believed was true, Melinda could be next. Despite Melinda's impassioned case that this could be someone who saw them on television out for some type of crazed revenge, the police, they didn't pursue it. Why would they? They had the man they believed was their killer in custody. Their suspect identified by a key eyewitness. Yes, Brooke was a child. She was 6 years old, but she knew the difference between make-believe and reality. and her memory, it seemed crystal clear. When she was asked, what did the man look like? Brooke responded, he looked like my Uncle Clarence. They would need more evidence, of course. But for now, it was a relief that this Uncle Clarence was off the streets. As Melinda shouted from every rooftop, he didn't do this. Authorities assured all the other members of Judy Johnson's family, little Brooke, her mother, and everyone else who knew and loved Judy, don't worry. Clarence Elkins will not get away with this. We will make sure this sick monster will never see the light of day.